The dimming sun glows red, and the Earth's rotten expanse is dotted with the ancient ruins of used and forgotten futures. Dying Earth by Jack Vance has 4 distinct parts. We'll be looking at the second book, The Eyes of the Overworld. It is a fix-up nearly as episodic as its predecessor, but it forms a cohesive, picaresque narrative featuring one delightfully vile anti-hero. Kugel the Clever, as he likes to call himself, is perhaps too clever for his own good. At the fair, he struggles to sell a single talisman at his dinky little booth. The merchant set up beside him, who seems to be getting all of the business, pulls Kugel aside to point out that his most loyal customer, Ikunu the Laughing Magician, is about to arrive, and convinces Kugel to plunder the Laughing Magician's mansion while he's distracted at the booth. Once in the mansion, Kugel races to fill his bag with priceless artifacts and powerful trinkets. But on his way out, because he had to grab just one more thing, he's trapped in a maze of glass whose exit has vanished. When the Laughing Magician returns, Kugel is given a choice for his punishment. Either be inflicted with a horrible enchantment called the Forlorn Insistment, or complete an errand for the Laughing Magician. Of course, he has no real choice here. And so Kugel must travel to the far north to seek a magical lens called the Eye of the Overworld. This allows the wearer to see the overworld, a higher plane of existence that is far better than our own in just about every way. Magical, rose-tinted glasses. But to make sure that Kugel stays on task, the Laughing Magician produces a covered glass bowl, and in it is a spindly white creature that seems to be all hooks, claws, and restless fury. The magician introduces this figure as Fursk, before placing the uncovered bowl on Kugel's abdomen, before the creature cuts its way into his viscera, somehow without leaving much more than a mark. Now, Fursk is actually an intelligent creature who will claw and scratch at Kugel's liver each time it senses that he strays from his errand. At last, Kugel is confined to a steel cage where a flying demon picks him up, flies him for several days, and then drops him in the land of Akuts. There, he comes across 2 villages. The first, called Smolad, is inhabited by the wearers of the magical cusp he's looking for. How lucky! The villagers of Smolad are a thoroughly gross people who live comfortably in dilapidated shacks. You see, upon wearing a cusp over each eye, one perceives not this realm, but the overworld. Their shacks are instead a glorious kingdom. The gruel they eat is a feast of endless variety, and their slovenly neighbors are handsome princes and beautiful princesses. The leader of Smolad says this to Kugel: "Yes, I realize that I see but a semblance, but so do you, and who is to say which is real?" Meanwhile, the second village is full of those who slave away to provide for those who live in Smolad. You see, the cusps are in limited supply. The entire second village is on a waiting list, until at last their turn arrives to live a beautiful lie. Kugel is at the very back of that list, and he can't afford to wait 30 years with Furks clawing at his liver with every delay. So he does the obvious. He finds the next man in line, a farmer, hits them over the head with a rock, steals their clothes, cuts off their beard, glues it onto his own face, and impersonates him. And the elder, grip weak on reality, doesn't even notice the difference in the man he's apparently known for decades. The ceremony begins, and the first cusp is placed on one of Kugel's eyes, offering him a brief glimpse of the heavenly overworld. Now, the elder warns Kugel to keep that eye closed until the second cusp is placed, because if he has both eyes open and he sees the real world along with the overworld at the same time, his mind may never recover. But just then, the farmer returns, interrupting the ceremony to prove that Kugel is an imposter. But because Kugel has already received one of the cusps, he is officially seen as one of the princes of Smolad and can do no wrong. All of his sins have been retroactively forgiven, and so the cusp remains his own. Now, this means that the farmer only receives the second cusp, half of what he's worked his entire life to receive. He tries to kill Kugel, who barely escapes Smolad with his life. Once at a safe distance, Kugel removes the cusp from his eye, afraid to spoil his tolerance for enticement. Now begins his long walk back home across the dying earth. Skulking further south down the beach, he comes across an old man sifting through the sand with a sieve. Upon inquiry, the old man explains that his great-grandfather lost an incredibly important heirloom on this beach somewhere, and he, his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather each spent their entire life combing this beach. Showing no interest in this old man's plight, he decides to to just walk past him, but his foot kicks up something hard from the sand. He bends down to reveal a studded black bracelet that shines with a purple luster. The old man drops his sieve and shouts, "You have uncovered the amulet of my ancestors, the House of Slay! Give it to me!" Kugel steps back. Come, you make a flagrantly unreasonable request. No, the amulet is mine. You do wrong by withholding it. Do you wish to vitiate the work of my life and 4 lifetimes before mine? The old man says. Why do you not rejoice that the amulet has been found? You are now relieved from further search. Explain, if you will, the potency of this amulet. It exhales a heavy magic. How does it profit the owner? And by taking this amulet, Kugel just leads himself to more misfortune. In the end, he would have been much better off just handing it over. But our protagonist never learns his lesson, triggering the collapse of each and every equipoised circumstance he comes across. Like if Samurai Jack was a total dick. Oh, fuck. The Wasps were very adamant for me to find a better filming location, so here I am. But in such a cutthroat far future, Kugel's trickery and betrayal are also incredibly important survival traits. He isn't the only one without empathy. After having braved countless miles of wilderness populated by man-eating Deodans, he is in desperate need for food and shelter. Luckily, he comes across the remote town of Vol, and luck would have it that there is employment for him as the town's watcher. The role is conveyed as largely symbolic, culturally valued, but not of any real necessity. It's just Kugel's style, a quick and easy paycheck. He is entitled to the city's vault of treasure, promised anything he asks for, and as watcher, can marry any woman in Vol he finds most attractive. All he needs to do in return is sit up there in the watchtower and keep an eye out for magnats, who he is assured to be nothing more than legend, probably never even existed. At the tavern, a certain woman catches his eye almost immediately, and although she is spoken for, they become engaged. Yet she constantly avoids his persistence to solemnize their connubiality. With weak patience strained, he climbs the watchtower and begins his first shift. Immediately, he demands that the furnishings be upgraded, going as far as to complain about the color of the rug. He's done zero work and already expects the world. The hetman who's led him up here promises to grant his wishes and climbs back down. But several hours later, Kugel has heard no word. He shouts down at the town, but everyone ignores him. He decides to climb down himself, but there's no ladder. But they don't call him Cugel the Clever for nothing. He uses all of the furnishings that are in the tower to knit a rope that he uses to climb down at night. In retribution, he fills his pockets from the town's treasury, finds the hetman who's just come out of the bar and beats the crap out of him, and then goes and finds his fiancée asleep in her bed. He forces her onto a boat to leave with him. But she cries not for her own safety, but for the town's. But what will become of Vol? No one watches and the spell is broken, she cries. So much the worse for the faithless folk of Vol. They have lost their treasure, their most beautiful maiden, and when day breaks, magnets will march upon them. And it is at that moment that a giant as tall as a mountain comes from the river beneath them and goes to destroy Vol. But that's not Kugel's problem. The Dying Earth is a work animated by parable and folklore. We as the reader know that Kugel feels no real empathy. He's legitimately the most terrible person in a world full of people who are almost as terrible. Through it all, he's pretty awful to women, but with a hint of media literacy, it's clear that this isn't something Jack Vance is celebrating. No, he's purposefully portraying a vile sort of character here who is tortured by all of their own actions. And it is incredibly interesting to read. Kugel has a wrongness, a wickedness that is just outside the scope of being relatable in any way whatsoever, and it comes across as hilarious. Something I find especially enjoyable about his characterization is the way he will just ask for the absolute maximum, as if he deserves anything beyond fate's worst punishment. He walks into an inn and asks for the nicest room, the best food, the most expensive wine, all whether or not he has a single bit of currency to his name, usually at the cost of someone else's hopes and dreams. Without this ever-present, high-maintenance greed, just about all of his misfortunes are easily avoidable. The reader constantly wonders, how long is he gonna get away with this? But in Kugel's muddled yet unwavering ethics, he's not sated or even all that interested in the illusory pleasures of the Eye of the Overworld. and is not propelled across the land by the internal tortures of Ferks. No, instead, he presses on to extract his revenge on the Laughing Magician for humiliating him. Jack Vance has created an incredibly intricate character work here, and in so many ways, Cugel the Clever, while heartless, is in fact quite clever. This book series also created the Dying Earth subgenre, whose most notable successor in literature is Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun, which was featured in my top 15 sci-fi video, so it should be clear that I really enjoyed this book. While the settings may bear certain semblances, such as the dying red sun and deep use of allegory, these works are far more different than I expected. While Dying Earth features a blend of both science fiction and fantasy, it's more fantasy within the disguise of science fiction, where Book of the New Sun is the opposite. It's science fiction using the disguise of fantasy that slowly unravels throughout the story. The Dying Earth series also has a colorful vocabulary, a consistent eloquence, and most intriguingly, a light-hearted prose. Throughout the reader's journey beneath a sun that could go out at any moment, and across a dismally lethal scape far beyond hope, they are confronted not with a sense of dread, but a great humor blossoming from each and every interaction. Because of that, this is perhaps the funniest book I've ever read. You don't have characters so much making jokes. No, the narrative itself is hilarious. The pieces are all set up in such a clear and concise manner that when they eventually clash, it just makes perfect sense. And that quality of Jack Vance's writing is what made The Dying Earth the most clever sci-fi book I've ever read. For more on my journey as an author and all things science fiction and fantasy, subscribe to Steller Reads.